Hey everybody, this is Ben from Pink Fohawk. We are an actual play podcast and we play 2nd edition Shadowrun. Old school, fast and loose, 80s, all the shit. And we just fired up our 2nd season of the podcast. We're 2 episodes in and we only have 15 episodes of the 1st season. So it's super doable to binge this shit and get caught up super quick. I think that's a good selling point of our podcast. We don't have hundreds and hundreds of episodes. We've only got 17 because we're fucking lazy. Anyway, check that out. We have a playlist of all the episodes right here on this YouTube channel. You can listen to all of it here, or you can listen to it on any podcast platform of your choice. We're everywhere. You can't avoid us. What is the 2nd edition book club, you ask? Well, we go through this book right here, the 2nd edition of Shadowrun, the best edition of Shadowrun, in my opinion. We go through it chapter by chapter with one of the actual co-creators from the very beginning, Tom Dowd. He's been awesome. Thank you again to Tom for showing up and putting up with all of us and all of our questions every single month. He's been really great. This month, we tackled The Matrix, one of the most controversial sections in the Shadowrun. I don't know if that's the right word. Disputed? I don't know. But it's a section of Shadowrun that a lot of people have problems with and think that they got to use VR 2.0 or scrap it all together and make deckers NPCs. And we sort of go through all that here with Tom and have we got some pretty tough questions asked to him as well. So it was a pretty awesome time. Anyway, without any further blabbing from me, please enjoy. Hello?
Well, now we're in trouble.
Well, hello there.
Oh, shit.
How's it going?
Kenobi, is that you?
What'd you guys fucking say about The Matrix? What'd you say?
We were about to say how much it sucks, but then you just showed up to say this.
Wait, did I really guess it?
Well, it's wired fucking matrices. Everything should be wireless. God damn it.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Where's that kick button?
You couldn't find that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, exactly. If we're relying on me to actually moderate correctly, we're doomed. How you guys doing?
Good, man. Feels like it's been a long time, but I guess it has been.
It has. It's been at least a month.
Yeah. Well, I missed the last one. I missed the magic one. So.
Oh yeah. Did you get to check? Did you get to watch that at least?
Oh yeah.
Nice. That was a good one.
That was a good one. I was sad I missed it. Damn.
Yeah, I know, man. It's tough. Some of these are tough to make.
But
for sure.
You guys have like the tendency of holding these on nights where I have to work the night shift. So
it's personal. Trust me.
Yeah.
No, sorry about that. I mean, hopefully you guys are able to check out the videos when they go up and can keep up. But
it's only fair since I keep trying to get you to write that essay about 2nd edition.
That's true. I have homework I got to do too.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean his dissertation on 2E?
Well, there's go ahead.
I started writing it on a plane ride for work a couple weeks ago, and then I read it after I wrote it, and I was like, God, it's terrible. So it's gonna take some work,
right? But then, some people, no matter what they write, it's gonna look terrible to themselves.
Yeah,
find someone you trust, get them to get a read over, and then
it's a beautiful stream of consciousness, I promise. But it's not very coherent for someone who's new to Shadowrun. The person that's like, which edition should I play? They're gonna see the freaking musings of a madman.
Well, if you want, dude, send it to me. I'll glance over it.
For the moment, I've just been sharing that video of you trying to motivate people to do.
Oh, the other musings from a madman.
Hey, it's the best thing. It's the best thing 2nd he has so far. So
yeah. Hey, Tom.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us once again.
I was going to say it all starts with the musings of a madman, so don't feel so bad.
That's true. Speaking of which, Matrix.
Speaking of the madman himself.
Yeah, we spoke of the musings of a different madman with the magic chapter, and now this one is out. I'll get an intro going since we're doing this for YouTube. Thank you everybody for joining. This is our 5th session of the 2nd edition book club. It's a pretty full house, which is pretty sweet. I feel like a lot of people were looking forward to this one. We're doing Matrix, which I'm so excited about. And I honestly rereading it because I don't know about anybody else here, and I'll want to open the floor up for anybody who wants to chime in. But when you get into Shadowrun, people warn you, the first thing they say is the Matrix is tough. Or they'll tell you right away, especially 2nd edition, they're like, just go straight to VR 2.0. Don't bother with the core. And so if you're like me, you just do it because you're already intimidated by the boogeyman everyone's made Shadowrun out to be over the years. And so you're just kind of like, I'll just take whatever the easiest things are they tell me to do. And so I've never really fully sat down in one sitting and like read the core Matrix chapter, like just end to end. And it doesn't take long. It's only like 19 pages.
Yeah.
And it's really coherent. I don't really get it. It makes a lot of sense to me. And it was actually pretty simple to me, but reading it, you can tell where things might be hard to run it. Like, and it comes down to like almost like a GM expertise to make things fluid. But in terms of like the rules and the lore and the way things work, it kind of was way simpler than I ever thought it was going to be. Way simpler to me than VR 2.0. Like that book is dense to me.
But the thing is, like, as far as Shadowrun goes, every edition, people tell me the same thing about the Matrix. Like, just like learn the rest of the system and then you can learn the Matrix. And then just like everyone tells this to their players, and then like we're like, all right, we're just gonna play without the Matrix. It's super complicated. And they're just building it up to be this massive boogeyman.
Yeah.
Whereas every edition of the Shadowrun that I've played, I looked at the Matrix and was like, all right, as much as I want to create a like 50-room dungeon for like this like mission, how about I limit that to 3?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just works out fine. And then, like, as you get better with it, and like then you can expand on the size of the Matrix dungeons. But like straight off aiming for like a massive, like, you know, a complex thing, that's what kills it. When you're like the GM just sits down with the hacker for like 2, 3, 4 hours while the other people are like, are we like, can we do anything now?
Right.
And
I think mentioning the time scale was important. Because when you said 2, 3 rooms, it's also sometimes when a group gets in a rhythm, you can run that in 20 minutes. And I know that the anti-Shadowrun crowd is always like, you order a pizza when the Decker starts and everybody else can eat. But, you know, my mages sit happily for 20 minutes while the gun bunnies shoot everybody.
Right. And what I've been trying to do when I run Shadowrun is like give the non-Decker like something to do during those 20 minutes. All right, if they really want pizza, I mean, it's an opportunity for it. But like, they could also be involved in a gunfight. Well, like, you know, the Decker's just being a vegetable, like, you know, his mind gone in the Matrix, or they could be doing like, you know, something else. They don't have to like give the Decker like his own session every time.
I like that. It's not a pizza problem; it's a pizza opportunity.
I just like to add, though, I think one of the things that kind of makes it like the pizza problem is that it's not really like time in the Matrix isn't the same as time in the meat world. So it doesn't sync up. And that's where the disconnect happens. And I think that's where the other players kind of zone out, because the Decker will have 3 times, you know, more actions, whatever, while he's in the Matrix. So that's part of the problem, I think.
Doesn't the like 1 round in the Matrix count as 1 round in the meat world or real world or whatever you call that?
Yeah,
that's what I know. Yeah,
that's where. See, so that's where I saw. That's where you can read it. You can see that like it's really up to the GM to rein that in, because I could feel like if you're doing like legwork, for instance, or whatever, you could let that go. You have to rein it in, because it is kind of, you know, someone could be hopping all over the globe in the Matrix, searching something way faster than real time as the rest of the crew's doing stuff. But it's like, as a GM, that's kind of that's where you have to kind of pull the reins on it.
Right. Well, the same thing kind of applies to regular legwork, right? If like the Phase wants to like take the samurai and they want to go talk to his contact, or like, you know, go for a meet or something like that, most of the time the Decker's not going to have much to do there. So it's kind of like for that. Yeah. But if you're planning on doing a really long thing, my favorite thing to do is like, all right, we'll handle that thing out in between sessions, and then like, you know, the rest of you can do that, and then we can concentrate on things that are fun while everyone's here, and then things that don't involve the Decker and only the Decker, we can do just like the GM and Decker on a separate date.
Right.
Yeah, I think the point that was just made about, you know, a pair of characters going off to do legwork is the same problem. Is very valid, but I think the big mistake, and I'll just flat out say it, I made, was that there should have been 2 versions. What's in the rules was always thought of as the overlay on top of what everybody else is doing at the same time. Meaning, infiltration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're trying to get in someplace, the decker's there, or the decker is there spiritually, or electronically, or virtually, or whatever you want. And the turns are going. It's just that everybody's doing different things in different places at the same time. There should have been another system for, I'm going to try and find this pay data or whatever, resolve that in a handful of rolls, and be done. Right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's not dramatically important.
Right. At the same time, having like rules with the caveat of like, don't do this while everyone's like, staring at the table, to have a more like fluffy and immersive thing when like the decker wants to go do something his own, and like, it's like, all right, session ends, everyone's done their legwork. Decker wants to do like more things, then we can just extend the session by a couple hours, just the Decker and the GM, while everyone else goes home, and then we'll pick it up afterwards. Because that's like a lot of the other systems and editions that try to dumb down the Matrix, they cut out all that really immersive, like Neuromancer style Matrix stuff that like is really immersive and really fun, but like just takes up more time. So like, I get that you can't always do like really deep hacks on like every network in the world in order to get like tidbits of information from like 6 different like like hubs, but like that thing is still there for like the immersion thing. So you still need to do a little bit of that. It just needs, the GM needs to think like, can I handle this now, or should we do this later, or like should we just simplify the rules right now because we don't have time for this.
You can also see where your heads were at, I feel like, when you're reading this section too, because it is kind of like assumed it's going to be handled like the other systems, where it does seem, if you think about it, it does seem like common sense to like, well, don't get super granular when it doesn't make sense to do that. Like social engagements, even like if your face is just sitting there talking to everyone in the bar, and you're going through all these social engagement rules for every conversation, like that's the GM's probably, they need to stop that and be like, yeah, okay, you reduce it to 1 roll if you see the rest of the crew getting bored. Like, roll me your etiquette. Yeah, you rolled well. You found someone in the crowd that responded to your questions. Like, you can reduce it to this quick test that doesn't bore the shit out of everybody else playing. To me, I feel like it's sort of assumed you're going to do that with the Matrix, but I feel like what's intrinsically different about the Matrix for people, especially Shadowrunner, fans or whatever, is like they are looking for that. You're almost looking for that crunch, and you don't know it. You're kind of like, I don't know. You're jumping in and trying to figure out like, how is this is going to be so different? Like, how do I hack in this game? And so almost like telling them that a single roll would not be sufficient. Almost.
Yeah, but I think something else we should have done was had, especially for the decking stuff, much more automatic success. Meaning there were certain circumstances with, you've got the right numbers, you don't even fucking roll. It just happens. You move on. That's much more even in tune with the fiction to some extent, right? That the guys are just so good, you just cut right through all the until you can't. Then
very Neuromancer.
Yeah. Then again, dramatically important. Now we get into the grit, and you have to make some decisions. But otherwise, it's like, I find the wall jack, I plug in, I'm in the local telecom grid. I blow through this. I don't even bother rolling. Now you're in the regional. Don't even bother rolling. You're good. Look for the crappy Fuchi warehouse that has a dumb terminal up there. That is, go, you're in now, and you just roll through that until and now you're in the main system, and no, you can't just roll.
Right. But again, I'm here to give you all the props, Tom, because I feel like when you read it, it does as you're writing it, I feel like that does seem like common sense. I feel like I could see from your perspective, like, I don't make them roll to open a door. If it's just a door, if it's like a certain, it's a locked door, like just assume someone can kick it open or pick the lock kind of or whatever. Like if it's not like a challenging barrier, then don't go through all the rules of how to get through it.
Yeah, it's just that that's not how the rules were set up, right? I mean, you didn't have anything. I mean, automatic successes first came in with the adepts, and that idea of I don't even have to worry about it if I've got enough. Right. If I've got enough swing, I don't have to play with it. I think that would have been the better go. The other thing that was about the Matrix is that it was the part of the Shadowrun rules that were the least familiar to everybody. Mm-hmm. Meaning, though there was goofy, chunky, sorry, I've got a cat climbing on me, combat rules and magic rules, people knew combat, people knew magic, right? So there was a baseline that they could build from and figuring out what this crazy game was trying to do. Because you knew what was supposed to happen. Oh, it's supposed to be a spell. I understand spell casting. How are they doing it? Oh, I see how they're doing it. There was no Matrix. This was entirely new, right? And even if you'd read Neuromancer or Johnny Mnemonic or whatever, this was brand new. This was different. And if it wasn't clear enough, it wasn't clear enough.
Right.
And you just look at it like, oh my God, what is all this? What is all this? Slave nodes and what? And what's supposed to tell?
How can you play Oregon Trail? What the heck is going on, right?
Yeah, and that kind of struck me as I was flipping through the rules, looking at them, just realizing, there's just, if you're not the right kind of nerd, it's just, wow, what is all this? What is all this nonsense? I don't reflexively understand what all this means.
Right. You don't have the frame of reference.
Yeah.
This is like so cathartic hearing Tom say all this.
What's that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm saying it's so cathartic to hear Tom say all this because I feel kind of like how Tom's explaining. I'm like, yeah, man. Like I opened it up and I was like, holy shit! Like I'm not a programmer at that level. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, wow, this is intense for a game, right? And I'm hearing Tom kind of like verbalize it. I'm like, oh, thank God.
Oh yeah, but it's also the designer problem, right? I mean, Paul did VR2. I did most of this with him chiming in, and we both knew technology.
Yeah.
It really should have been handed then to somebody who didn't and said, how do you make sense of this? Right?
And to be fair, you're doing a lot and not much space. And I know you've already mentioned before, like page count was really a thing to consider and like how much it costs to add pages. And so like when you look at this, I mean, you're not only setting up the flavor of what the Matrix is and how it appears to just even normal users, and then also this whole like the regional code thing and stuff. I mean, that stuff's awesome. It's crazy that you guys had all that plotted out in terms of the regional and local
telecom grids.
Yeah, telecom grids. So like there's a lot in here, and I feel like what's tough is like you kind of said, it's hard to know where the line is. Like, okay, where do I need to start paying attention as a decker? Because it's sort of like I feel like it zooms in real quick. It goes from like this is the Matrix, and this is what it means to the world. Like this is how important it is. This is what people, here's a little bit of information on like what it looks like or how you can kind of experience it. And then you go into, okay, but you're a decker and this is what you do with it. And it's very quick. But I mean, like you said, you didn't have all the pages in the world to get all that out. So I think what tripped me up, I mean, I kind of want to start back at the beginning here soon too, because I know we're getting kind of into the weeds pretty quick. But I'll save it. I'll save it before we get further in. But first, just going back to the beginning, and this goes all the way back to the even like, and so it came to pass stuff, but like just even the reasoning for the Matrix, I thought that was really cool how you guys gave a reason for SimSense technology and like how the Matrix became like the dominant way to of like information in communication is awesome. So like reading this first page of like just the introduction to the matrix, accessing the matrix, I don't know, time and movement in the matrix, all like connected to the different grids and stuff. To me, like reading that again, I thought you got a lot done in very few pages, and I felt like completely caught up. But again, I'm the Neuromancer fan, so it all kind of rang true to me. I'm not sure if there's anybody here that's never read that book or anything. It maybe was thrown off by it, but to me, I thought fit the bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, like we did with the magic, it was kind of trying to back figure stuff. Why would this exist? Why would you have this? And we didn't really get into it, but there was just the idea. We did get it a little bit, but we didn't dig too far into it. It comes out later and some other stuff. The idea of just this whole data economy, right? That a lot of this stuff just existed so that ordinary workers could just move data around. And then all this stuff was just done to make that more and more efficient and more, them more and more effective. And it got repurposed. It got repurposed into entertainment. It got repurposed into espionage. It got once you had this thing that all these guys, sitting at the, again, the room of cubicles with the guys jacked in, and they're just, all you're seeing is their eyes flicking. And what's going on is billions of dollars of new yen worth of data is flying all over the place. Again, they're in their own little VR sim, moving it around and, doing whatever. And then you've got, the guy in the back alley splicing wires to get into a network to screw that all up.
Right. And I like thinking back to Neuromancer too, it never really gave a lot of that context. It kind of always came from Case's perspective,
right,
and what he was doing with it, which seemed like he was kind of behind the scenes on a lot of things. And so that was it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's important to remember, and this was a lesson that we didn't take to heart. William Gibson did not understand computers.
Yeah.
Neuromancer was written on a typewriter.
Right.
He had no idea how they were actually work. He had this fictional conception of the ideas behind it, but he didn't understand how it. Sorry, my cat is torturing himself. What? Yes, I'm doing something. I can't play with you right now. Go play with your sister. Okay. He had this conception of how it should work, and so described it dramatically. But he didn't have any idea how, packet switching and routers and all of that stuff worked. It didn't
Hot
matter.
RAM.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Right?
Right.
I think he joked once that, his understanding of computers was a niece or something had an Atari 2400 or whatever, and he marveled that you could plug cartridges in and play different games, and that became, oh, well, there's your deck, and these are your, that's what that was.
Right.
And meanwhile, we're, Paul and I are arguing about regional telecom grids and nonsense, IO ports on cyber decks, and,
Right. But in the same way, if you wanted to make hacking super realist, it would basically bound down to really complicated things that take forever, or social engineering.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's already rules for social engineering, so
yeah,
in other places.
Yeah. Real world hacking is you spend a lot of time getting information, then you write a program and you hit return and you hope it works.
pretty much.
Right.
And
it's just
Real world hacking is that scene in Blade where Deacon Frost is sitting staring at a computer screen while it decodes an entire ancient vampire language.
Yep.
Or real world hacking. I mean,
Yep.
Yeah, I read that too about Gibson, how he basically he kind of studied the hacker culture from the outside, and that was sort of his really only experience with how any of it worked. And so, yeah, I could see that. It makes sense. If you guys are both techies, that you might have missed that perspective. But I do think that there's a lot of I thought you guys did a really good job flavoring it Like there's still a lot of great writing involved that like gives you a good picture of what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to feel. I think what tripped me up, and not even, it was something I had to like, I was trying to pay attention to like, where is it where I start to be confused of where I am? And for me, it was, and anybody here can call me out and just say, no, you're crazy. But to me, it was the chapter, the matrix geography. And I was like, maybe that's it, because maybe it should have been like system geography. I'm trying to figure out why people use the nodes and the system for like everything.
The thing with that is, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you go to page 167, there's a picture that's got the three-dimensional nodes and the diagrams. The reason we went that way was because we could actually do those on a computer.
So, okay.
That's, I mean, they're impressive.
I did those, right? Those shapes.
Oh, nice.
I did those. Oh God, what was it? Oh crap. It was Strata 3D.
That's awesome.
Back in the day, right?
Yeah, like from a 80s music video there with Dire Straits or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, man.
And we knew a guy, Dave McCoy, who had a company called Atlantic Digital, and they did computer graphics on Amigas. And they're the ones who did the images in the first edition virtual realities.
Oh, nice.
Like, the cover image is Dave's and his team's work. And we knew we could do that, so we decided to do that. May not have been the greatest decision in the world, but
that's awesome.
That's the way we went, and that's kind of what we built from. Plus, there was this, in my head, you always want to have an escalation of something, right? So if it starts with these really simple primitive, let me back up. If we went straight into sculpted systems, then everything is special, which means nothing's special.
Mm-hmm.
If you started with really basic primitives and shapes and everything like that, then there was somewhere to go narratively. You know, it's like, yeah, okay, you look like you're the guy from the Dire Straits video. And then all of a sudden there's somebody there who looks realistic. And your thought is, oh crap.
What deck is he using?
Right. This is, you know, or you go through a node and suddenly you're in a forest.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. I'm in trouble. You know, there was that you could use that symbology to your effect, I should say.
Right, that makes sense. Like desensitize you.
Yeah, but it gave you storytelling options. Right?
Right.
But yeah, again, I'm looking at the matrix geography and then how you build a cyber deck, and I'm just going, yeah, it was probably a little too much.
Well, I get let me rephrase, because what I meant to say too about this is that like it's kind of goes to your point where you're saying that you wanted to do two different systems.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like if that was more clearly stated, that like when you're in the weeds, like when you're in the place you want to be to get that big data steal, or get that pay data or whatever, like here's what the geography of a system. And to me, as a GM, when you're reading that, you're like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm reserving that for like, for when they're in the shit, and I want to build the drama basically. And
keep talking. My one cat took my advice and went looking for the other cat, and now they're fighting.
I love it. My daughter's doing that somewhere, so we're all good.
I was going to say earlier that before I ever got into Shadowrun Matrix and like really like falling in love with the whole concept, I used to play this game called Decker, which I realize is basically someone saw the Shadowrun game and decided to make a decking game out of it, and now it's like online for free.
The Genesis one, right? It's like the Genesis Matrix.
I have no idea. There's like I'll put the link in the Discord.
Yeah, it definitely is, Ben. I remember checking this out.
There's a few I've learned over the years. There's a few Decker, like they're named the same exact name, and there's a few different games, but they all kind of boil down to the same deal. But yeah, like I think Eddie, there's one I'm thinking about that's like basically exactly the Genesis game, but just
like the Persona with like the Silver Surfer Persona kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet liquid metal
T1000
Persona.
kind of thing going on.
Exactly.
I'd always assumed that the matrix geography shapes were chosen because so many random D&D dungeon generators at the time used those shapes, and we used them, and we wrote the rules in for which nodes could connect to which we taught them when I was younger, and we made overly sophisticated targets, but we loved it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they were also basic flowchart shapes. You know, if you're doing a flowchart of some kind, that's what they are.
Sure, now that I'm older, I'll admit that, but you couldn't get 17-year-old me to admit that.
Yeah.
But there's also like a running someone through a system and they're mapping it on their end, and you describe this thing that looks like it looks like a brick, a large brick, and they know like, oh, that's the system, that's the sand.
Right.
You know, like that's kind of cool. It is really cool to give like that information that any Decker would know. Mm-hmm. And to be able to kind of navigate where they're at, or like, no, there's not going to be any pay data here. This is I'm just at an IO port, or I don't know, just like something where you can kind of like, it gives them sort of insider knowledge that you don't have to explicitly explain as a GM. It's kind of cool.
Now, I don't remember. Did we ever put in anywhere in the rules where we just like told the GM to give the Decker the node map or parts of the node map and let him just figure out how they wanted to go through it? We talked about that at one point, where from the first sand you could basically get a map. And again, the whole idea was, okay, here's the map. Where do you go? What do you want to do? And you could try and figure out your route through it, making assumptions based on the symbology. I need to get to that. So, okay,
Right.
I can't find off the top of my head, but you guys did put mechanics in for getting the whole map, but it is very polite and reminds the GM to keep some of the secrets for himself. I'll look for it.
Okay.
That's cool.
I think it's on page 168 where it's talking about mapping the system. It says the game master is responsible for mapping out systems for the player Deckers to invade.
I think the map is normally in the CPU. That's one of the things you can get in the CPU.
Sure, that would make sense.
Since you can transfer to any node from there. I mean, that's cool too. I mean, that does change things. I feel like if the Decker has the full system map and can kind of either be like, oh shit, they're not wandering in there blind, completely. They can like pick their shortest path to the CPU at least, or whatever shortcuts they think they could hit.
We probably should also have like somewhere, I don't know where this would have been, maybe put it in the VR book, template system maps, so that the game master didn't have to. I mean, this is the mapping the system has a random generation system. Maybe just put a half dozen.
Is that in Sprawl Sites? Mm-hmm. I think there are a few.
Were there in Sprawl Sites?
There are a few system maps, I think, in Sprawl Sites. I'll grab my.
Yeah, they even have like names like a
bank computer.
AA Megacorp. They have one AA and then one AAA. And
I haven't looked at that book, and I don't.
You can't outsmart yourself, Tom.
I guess
you already thought of that.
Well, and that's the weird thing about looking back so far is my brain holds the stuff we talked about doing equally to the stuff that we did.
Right.
So it's like, did we actually do that? We did do that. Okay. And that in the early days, that was always the hassle with me running the game at conventions, is my brain would default to the version of the rule we didn't use.
Right.
Like, what? That's not how it works? Oh, right. We changed that, didn't we?
Well, so that's a good question. So maybe this is the question that's burning in everyone's mind. So,
oh God,
when you run a session, how did you run them? How faithful were you to going through the full matrix map for Deckers? Like run us through.
Yeah, when I did it, the Decker, if the Decker was just kind of doing the equivalent of legwork, it would be automatic. We would just roll some dice, or we'd have very brief things. Again, whoever said it up front about the whoever going off to doing the interpersonal legwork, very similar. You just have a mini scene and get on with it. But I would build stuff so that what was going on in Meat Space was paralleled by what needed to happen in the Matrix. So a lot of the Decker had to get through this part of the system to open this door, or to turn these cameras off, or to trigger this alarm over there so the guards would go that way instead of this way, that kind of stuff. So there was all that parallelism that we probably incorrectly assumed everybody would just do was what I did.
Right.
But not everybody, we never went into how to do that, which we should have done.
Even if it's kind of late now, like I would have appreciated some form of essays online. If I read the book and the book's not like, super descriptive on how to do something, and some form of either fan or like, designer of notes on like, hey,
Yep.
this is how we did that, would have been much appreciated.
Yep.
I remember back in the day, I read about the 4th edition D&D, and like, people hate the system or love the system, like doesn't really matter. But when they were about to release the game, they put out these 2 books filled with essays of like, this is what we were thinking, this is what we did, and this is what made it in, this is what didn't make it in.
Mm-hmm.
One which was more oriented towards the players, and one was more oriented towards the dungeon master. But that's sort of like, essays and like, keep through the designer's mindset. I appreciated that a lot. It's a shame a lot of other systems don't do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, back 1991 or whatever this was for 2nd edition. I don't even think FASA had a website, because I don't think we did everything through the computer networks, but there was no place that you could go for all that. Like on CompuServe, there was a files area that you could download some stuff, and that's where you could get the errata. But it was a forum on CompuServe. It wasn't our forum. The idea of a company website that was a resource site came much later.
It surprises me, talking about this, that that opportunity wasn't taken when VR 2.0 was written, because I think that's what the issue is here. It's almost like, in my opinion, VR 2.0 it kind of flattens out it takes away the mini dungeon. So it really streamlines Matrix in that way, where it's like, okay, your system is just, here are the different target numbers you need to worry about when you're trying to get something done in this system. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to go through any weird map. It's just all there. So that sounds super simple, but then it's this whole book around, there's so much extra complexity. It doesn't ever do what you're talking about, where it's like explaining when you're not doing a super, sweaty palmed decking moment, trying to hack into this place. Like, don't do any of this. Just, resolve it in a few rolls, or a few examples on how to handle legwork without having to get into the nitty gritty. I'm surprised that it didn't go there. It almost like you'd said something in one of our earlier sessions where you said we had to simplify things in order to add complexity. And I feel like this is one of those instances that VR 2.0, in that sense, it's like they added more complexity than simplification in my mind. Like, for instance, like we were talking, Mr. Locke was talking about this too. Like there's no sample decks in VR 2.0. So if you want to be a decker, you got to build your own deck, which the rules are there. They're not simple.
Yep.
They're not the hardest thing, but they're not simple. And
there's no examples.
There's no examples, and they've made the decks in in core obsolete. So you want to use VR 2.0, get ready to build your own deck and get into the thick weeds anyway, So it's interesting that like it seems like common sense to us now to like have written all that out, but it seems like it wasn't. It's just it was something we thought, or I guess you guys had thought we would just handle like the rest of the book.
Yeah, and VR 2 was I think it was just after me. I think we commissioned it while I was still there. but I didn't do anything on it.
Are you at least around for like cooperating with the like as a reference or something like that?
I was across the hall, but I was making a video game.
That's
So,
when you're doing the Genesis game?
No. I was starting on Mech Commander.
Oh, sick.
Oh, nice.
So sick.
Yeah, because looking at the copyrights, this was 95. So yeah, this would have been. And if you look at the again, I'm looking at VR2. If you look at the credits for it, it's one of the few that have Carl Sargent listed in development. And Carl was supposed to be the developer after me.
Okay.
And it didn't work out. So that's where Mike Mulvihill came in.
Okay.
So Carl did some development on it while he was in England still. And then Mike came in as the 3.0, eventually the 3.0 developer. But at this point, just coming in to continue the 2.0 stuff. And he finished working on it after Carl stepped aside.
Tell me at least you got in there to make some of that sweet 3D art.
No, none of this is me. I
loved art in that. I mean, that is a fever dream. That book, when I'm looking through it, I'm like, I can't make heads or tails of what's happening, and it's awesome.
Yep. And you'll also notice it's the first where we really leaned into grayscale printing. That before that, a lot of the black and white art was black and white. But there's a lot of grayscale in this book.
That's true. And a lot of the art from the supplements from that point on kind of had that same feel and look. And there's almost like a comic booky quality to it. Reminds me of like Hellboy, some of the art.
I think you're right about 2.0. And again, it was Paul coming in and kind of putting the reality stamp on it while fictionalizing it, if that makes any sense.
Well, there's several years had gone by where it just there was more a better understanding from public perspective on how computers work too.
Yeah, but it didn't necessarily make it easier to run.
That's my experience. Yeah.
The other thing that really slowed down games that we were running is like, let's say the decker's doing his thing, like, shutting off cameras, like opening doors, while the physical team's like walking through the location. What happens when the decker triggers an alarm and like he triggers a trap or something and some ice come out to fight him? Like the fight, as much as the fight in like the real world as in like the Matrix, it takes a long time because it's a Shadowrun, and that always dragged on to being like really like slow and arduous. Like it was one thing to say like if players tripped like a physical alarm and then like everything went haywire and the decker was trying to do things to cancel the alarm, the other guys were fighting like people on the ground, everyone's fighting, that still works. But when the decker, and like the inverse kind of works, where if the decker if they end up fighting people in the physical security, the decker can still do things on the Matrix to interact in that fight, even if he has no physical presence. The opposite is not true. Like if the decker triggers like ice or alerts the system operator, there's nothing the physical guys can do to contribute to like the decking fight. Like unless the SysOp happens to be sitting across the hall, they can just walk over and shoot him in the head. Like, and due to the nature of the Matrix, he might not even be in the same building.
Might even be in the same country. Yeah.
Right. So that's something else, and it kind of devolved into like the whole group just staring daggers at the hacker if he did anything that wasn't like utmost stealth and like just try to avoid all cyber combat. And cyber combat is part of the fantasy of like hacking, even if it never gets used because of like the arduous time constraints.
Yep. Some of the black ice fights would just go on too long. If it was resolvable within a turn or two, then it's not as bad for everybody else. But that wasn't always the case.
And due to the nature of the Matrix, there's nothing preventing the system from sending out more ice after you as you're trying to like beat the first one.
Right.
So like it's just a losing situation, no matter how you look at it.
Yep. Can't argue with that.
I mean, in a way, it's almost, you could have that same issue with, astral space,
Mm-hmm.
right? If there's someone's doing astral combat with a spirit and the team can't really contribute to that. I mean, they could maybe move the person's body, which is probably a worse thing it's not helping. So, again, I kind of feel like that's maybe the through line is it's like, you just have to try to run it the same way in that sense, like use that same mentality of like, is this going to be boring or a pain in the ass? If so, then I'll just reduce it. And I think the entire table, no one's going to complain that, or if they do, then it's maybe they're at the wrong table. But it's like, if you're making everything exciting and fun and streamlined when it feels like it needs to be, I don't think anyone would complain about that.
Mm-hmm.
And Bumblebee brought up a good point. He mentioned in Silver Angel, I'd asked you, Tom, how you run it at your table. And he pointed out that basically you can see that's how you're running it in Silver Angel.
Mm-hmm.
That same sort of, when it matters, and when it doesn't, roll a dice and let's see how you do.
Move on with your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the one time that I've theorized where cyber combat makes sense and like could be fun and engaging is not when you're infiltrating a building or you're trying to get into a place because like everyone's trying to be quiet. It's the opposite. If you're back at your safe house, you're laying low, and then the corpse sec team got a lead on where you are, and they're coming in and they're like gonna hack all the cameras, and then they're gonna do their spec up BS. Then that's the opportunity for the hacker to start shaking things around. And the same thing that if in the more modern Shadowruns, everything is wireless, so everyone's carrying a comlink, your comlinks can get hacked. So when you're fighting opposition force for some reason, and then they have some sort of hacker trying to hack into your comlinks, then there's an opportunity there for the hacker to actually do some cyber combat. But because everyone's fighting anyways. But pretty much the only use I found for it that didn't just bog everything down. So that comes to say, what do you do when you're doing everything right, that the hacker is taking all the steps to be stealthy and he blows it, he just rolls really poorly on something, tries to spoof the ice away, and then just glitches or just rolls poorly there, and then there's no going around it. He got caught. What then? Because physical security is not going to show up until they have a trace on them. So are you just going to waste 5 rounds until they can manage a trace, or what? Because the alternative is just to remove the consequences, which makes it boring because what's the point of rolling if the consequences are moot?
Right. Yeah, it definitely requires some GM finesse to make it work for everybody. But I'm getting to a point I'm building up the confidence to run. So I've never run a player character in the Matrix yet, but most of it was kind of like what I said. It was me trying to search around and find some Rosetta Stone that had simplified the Matrix in a way that was easy for me to understand. And it's funny because it's I look at Mr. Johnson's little black book for 3rd edition, and it's got, I know Noish isn't here, but he talks about it a lot too. It's got quick resolution rules for car chases and for decking. And it's basically that. It has I think there's 2 or 3 ways to do it. And the easiest one is just literally resolve it in a single dice roll, which Ghost, I know you would not appreciate that way of playing it. But then there's 2 others that are just a little more in depth. But it's basically what, Tom, you're already saying, is it's yeah, that's kind of assumed for most of what you're doing if you're doing legwork or if you're doing anything that would not be exciting for anyone else. Mm-hmm. You just sort of resolve it in an etiquette test kind of thing, basically.
Mm-hmm. There is apparently a copy of Silver Angel up on Scribd.
Hey. There you go.
That's where I got it. Full disclosure.
You owe Tom 2 cents.
I would have bought it if I could. It's kind of like emulating old NES games. I would buy it if I could.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. Here is my PSA for Catalyst to get that 2nd edition PDF up on drive-through. Get it for sale. Come on,
Yep.
let's do this.
Yeah, please. I'd like to hand over money.
I want to give you my money.
You want
Right.
to spend it, you know. And I'm too old to be like going around pirating shit. Like I want to buy things. Make it easy,
A
goddammit.
lot of us are spending more money printing a shitty PDF at some like print place. So like, come on. I have my soft cover and it's in good condition. 11th printing. I'm putting that offer back out there again. Jason Hardy. I've got the 11th printing. Come on, man. I'm offering it. You can take it for free and make your scan. I'll sacrifice it, my baby.
Some of us have set searches across the entire internet to buy enough copies for their whole table.
Sure.
And it's hard.
And it's getting pricier. I mean, about a year ago when we were working up our podcast, like I bought a lot of books for pretty cheap, but second edition books, man, they're going up. The used prices are going up.
Yeah, there's this like podcast. I think it's called like Purple Comb Over or something. But anyways, they like really blow up the price of all the fucking books.
They screwed it up for everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, God damn it.
Put it on Twitter, saying everybody's buying new copies of old books.
Right.
Sorry, I have a Scribd account, so I'm actually looking at Silver Angel for the first time, and I don't think how long. But looking at that system map, that's an electronics diagram. I mean, it literally looks like how you would diagram out like transistors and resistors and capacitors and all that stuff.
Page 16, I assume. Oh yeah, those are capacitors. And those are ground.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. Thanks, Tom.
Oh,
now
that's
I know
awesome.
how I got set on my career path.
That's crazy.
It's etched on the back of your retinas. You didn't even know it.
It really is. Though.
I'm not shocked that I did that because I took technical electronics in high school. I thought I was going to get into computer science before I left turned and went into filmmaking. So I learned all, again, transistor, all of that stuff. So I'm not surprised that I went and did that.
I'm doing it in reverse. I went into filmmaking and now I'm learning about this shit for the first time right now.
And I'll bet we didn't do it because it's a pain in the ass to do that. It looks really cool.
That looks really cool. I think this is what I was thinking, by the way, instead of Sprawl Sites. Sprawl Sites has basically, it lists it out. It doesn't have the map itself, but it's got basically like what's it called? What was it in VR 2.0? The sheath, the threat sheath or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
the threat responses and trigger levels.
Yeah. Or what's it called when you can create like basically the layout just in all the
ACES?
numbers?
Access, control, index, files.
I love that you know all the words.
Sorry, I run a
But I know
game
none of them.
weekly. I run a game weekly, so I'm exposed.
But yes, all of those. Yeah, like in Sprawl Sites, it's got like, it'll say like, it's pretty cool actually. It shows you the police station and it tells you a little bit about like what a typical police station, how its security would be laid out. And then it gives you the map of the physical police station. And then on the sidebar, it has like computer red 6. It has a trace and report 4. Right. So it kind of tells you what they typically would have, but it doesn't go into super detail, but pretty cool. I recommend it, everybody. Go buy it. Oh, drive-through, I guess. I guess you just gotta get it off Scribd. Does anybody else have like specific questions? Or I know Noy should. I'll dig up. He had some questions written out from earlier, but I'll also kind of want to open it up to everybody in case they have just like general or. We got Tom Dowd here. It's not every day.
Well, I'll get a little bit brave and ask a little bit of a perhaps out there question. But when it came to the system design and the play, am I the only one who got that was kind of like playing a rogue game or an online computer game back then? I'm ancient. We had games in text back then, but it felt like that. And I think that's one of the reasons it was easy for me to understand it because I was out there beating up Yendor.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm sure there was some influence. I mean, I at least was playing all those games as well. I don't think Paul probably was. Bob Charette wasn't. He was painting miniatures.
It always seemed to be like, the pay data was the loot in the chest, and
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know, it was easy
Oh,
for me to
totally.
run because it was parallel.
Totally. Yeah. That's legit. I mean, I'm just thinking of Wizardry and all that stuff and those games that they were totally, super simple maps with ASCII graphics, and
Yep. The best of times.
It's funny because
you could run those games on your watch now.
watches
So
can run
true.
Crisis now. When I was before I came to the tabletop game, because I played the Genesis game as a kid. I loved Shadowrun, but I hadn't come to the tabletop portion of it yet. And one of the first kind of foray into it was this mush online. It was the Shadowrun Denver mush. It was a third edition mush. And that was really, I never really got into it because none of them liked any of my character ideas and wouldn't actually let me in. But when I was creating the character, it kind of was like what you were talking about, Ramrod. It was like, it just felt right to be talking about. I was building a decker actually, and just like typing in all that stuff and like seeing it in like a text game format was kind of cool. I guess it's just.
I think it matched the style of the time. So I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. Let's see. Noish had a question of, casual users in the Matrix. Was it intended that all the Matrix users be deckers?
No. That's what I was talking earlier about the corporate guys sitting in their cubes, jacked in, doing whatever, right? But it was all, they're all within protected systems. There's no deck per se needed. It's certainly not hardened or protected or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just enough that they could do their work. The equivalent of Chromebooks these days. Just enough that they could do whatever they needed to do.
Right.
And I would assume similar would be for home use. You'd have these little crappy. I think back to again the early days of home computer stuff. What was that? Microsoft made that little home computer box. I remember what it was called. I bought one for my parents, but it was basically an email box that you plugged into your TV. But I would imagine similar things like that would have existed in the consumer world, but they wouldn't have been good for much unless you hacked it.
Right. Unless you love those insanely high target numbers.
That's right.
Oh, there's that where you're talking about the telecom grid and getting into different RTGs and all of that. You talk about the passcodes. Like if you have passcodes, you can go anywhere.
Right.
And that's that line. If you just flash the code past the node. Mm-hmm. First of all, I love the rhyme. But also, it's like I feel like that's kind of the answer. Like they don't ever see. I guess if they're paid to see, if they're depending on what their access level is, where they're working, whatever. But I feel like they just don't have to go through the same loops and hoops that deckers do. Mm-hmm. They just go in if they have the passcode.
Right, but they're not trying to they're just trying to use the matrix, whereas the decker tries to manipulate the matrix.
Yep.
Right.
They can do things it's not supposed to do.
Trying to make it stop slapping yourself. Make it do
one thing
things to itself.
That I noticed is consistent in all of the early Shadowrun books is all the corporate types at least have a data jack. So the way I always assumed is even though they weren't decking, they were jacked in and they were using the specific limits of their terminal, right? The guys moving data, they don't need a fancy deck because that terminal has its own access key. Own way to get in. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. And, they could just move around while they're connected to that terminal. And some of the adventures, you want to go to that terminal because it already has access.
Right. It's already cleared through. Yeah. Yep. 100%.
I think more and more that Pink Fohawk probably would have gotten along better as opposed to electrical diagrams if it were just a terminal map like it were subway systems. He would have no complaints.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Been interesting. That would have been an interesting approach. Yeah, I do note that I think looking at Silver Angel, I think this is the only time we ever did this as a system map. But that
was the very first adventure, right?
That was I can't believe I did, but I keep wanting to say I wrote it in a weekend.
That's awesome.
It was probably closer to a week and a half. but it was literally a case of the books coming together, everything's happening. We decided that we needed to do a Game Master screen, and somebody went, "Oh crap, we need an adventure to put in the Game Master screen. How fast can you write it?"
That's pretty cool. Was that standard? Do they usually give adventures with Game Master screens?
I think at that time they did. I don't quite remember. But this was I think I've told this story before, where there was no format for Shadowrun Adventure, so I wrote it using the Star Trek adventure format. And they were
awesome.
like, yeah, no. That's
oh my word.
And then we sat down and figured out what the format should be, more or less, and I had to rewrite it.
So I bought the Game Master screen, and I got the Game Master screen. And then one day I saw like I heard about it, Silver Angel, and I was like, I want to pick that up, and it wasn't available. And I realized it was supposed to have come with the Game Master screen. So now I have 2 Game Master screens to have Silver Angel.
There you go.
So your weekend work cost me.
Cost you.
The art on that Game Master screen is so amazing, by the way.
Oh, yeah. What's her name? Janet
DeLuzio.
Yeah, Janet DeLuzio. She's that I love that super wide image she has on there, and
so much,
and
so
the pop outs.
You're gonna get a tattoo of it, aren't you?
Oh yeah,
across your back, right? Tattoo.
Too many hours.
No, he's gonna get that street shaman for sure.
Oh, dude, someone on Reddit. I don't know if you saw this, Tom, but someone saw the reference that Bradstreet used for that street shaman. Mm-hmm. What page is it on? The guy that's like writing in chalk on the street, and he's in like he's got kind of like a rockabilly look to him. Let me see what page was that?
Oh yeah.
It's in the magic section.
I got it here. I'll post it.
Well, you guys are
it's like my favorite picture in the entire.
Yeah, it's our favorite photo in that whole book.
Yeah. Someone found. I'll find the Reddit post.
I posted it here in the.
Yeah. They were like, it's.
Jackson.
They found a picture of Jackson Pollock, and it's like definitely the reference, which is just so cool. I mean, that gives even more meaning to. To it.
Neat. I hadn't seen that.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Something that I kind of missed when I was reading through the chapter. There's no mention of any interactability between deckers and riggers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if a drone is like taking in commands from so is this supposed to work?
Was entirely to prevent Decker riggers.
Dick riggers.
Yeah, that came up, and we really thought, well, is there much of a difference? No, but we wanted them to be 2 different quote unquote roles out there. Would it have made more sense to combine them in terms of solving some of the Decker problems? Maybe.
Well,
maybe.
You could have, like, how do you say, by making the skills required and the equipment required to do like rigging versus decking, if they're different enough, then it splits them off, like, enough. Mm-hmm. It's like you could do a Decker Street Sam if you really cared for it, but like you'd be kind of like, splitting apart for what you're trying to do. But it's still kind of like possible if you're willing to invest the time and like karma into it. The same thing with like rigging. But my thing is like how I view rigging and like deckers, like the main threat to a rigger is a decker. So it's not so much that I want to be a decker rigger. It's more so that like if there's a drone flying super high up in the sky, the decker should be able to do something about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which, like, no mention of it.
VR 2.0 goes into some of that. I think there's like there are rules for like if a decker's trying to use a system set up for riggers, it's like it gives us a target number penalty or whatever.
Yeah.
But then there's also like I think it also mentions that you could get both types of you basically could get a separate data jack and build the hardware for rigging into that data jack. You basically have to keep them separate, and you have to build in like a switch that you could switch back. But
like, can Dickers matrix kill drones? Which is like the important part.
I don't know.
And second ed, not really, but
yeah,
later editions, I think like 6th edition can.
Yeah.
For
Before, since they made the Matrix wireless, they can, but like.
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, obviously, the core edition didn't do much at all with riggers. The Rigger Black Book.
No rules for riggers except like, oh, when you're doing gears, you can also buy these drones, and like they kind of work together.
Yep. And then Phil McGregor did the Rigger Black Book, which I edited heavily, and that fleshed all that out for the most part. I'm looking at my PDF of it. Yep. But we really didn't even. Drones existed, but they weren't a thing. You know?
I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves because we're not in that section yet.
There's no section to get to.
There is no section. I guess it was in combat, right? Combat had the.
Yeah, there's a little bit. It's not.
Well,
there's some stuff in the
gear.
There's some stuff in the equipment side that.
Yeah, we'll get to the gear. Then it's all explained there, I'm sure. I felt like, am I crazy? I felt like there was like satellite rule in this book.
VR 2.0 has satellite connection rules.
This is VR 2.0. Okay.
Yep.
So how would you have handled that using core rules, Tom? Like in terms of like even if you're thinking about like a remote controlled car, because there was like a remote control you could purchase for a remote control interface.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be more of like you'd use almost like a terrain table type of thing, like if it's more difficult to run it? Probably.
I mean, it was the easiest way is to just run it as an extension of the player.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a remote thing that does X, Y, and Z that if you're commanding it, you can then do that over there. But it has certain vulnerabilities.
It's like you're in it.
Yeah. It's like it's more telepresence than anything else.
Maybe give like a small reaction penalty or something.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, man, we're all making this more complicated than it needs to be.
Yep.
I realized too, I've said this a million times, so I won't say it after this, I promise. But I feel like after this edition is where things were that complex. People were asking these same kinds of questions, and then the answers were kind of given, and then those answers kind of became core rules.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of where it's almost, instead of telling people to go, well, all the pieces are here, you just can just run it the way you want to run it at your table. It became more about giving more simulationist rules. So
over the editions, Shadowrun has been like into this trend of like complaining that things are too complicated, then like coming out with a new rule set that's even more complicated, and then just kind of losing everyone. Like, and then the cycle continues. Just like
I don't know. The more complicated it is, the simpler it's going to be, right?
Yes.
Right. Think about it.
Then they like 4th edition onwards, every edition they just radically change like big chunks of the rule set, especially matrix wise, because people have always complained about the matrix. It's like, oh, it's too complicated. It's like, all right, let's see if we can like simplify this. And then it comes out as like, this is worse than it was. It's like, yes, but it's been simplified. Like, how?
They added wireless.
They just cut half the pages out.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's interesting to me. I mean, I know it depends. Everyone's different. And for me, I'm an idiot, as I've said before. And so when I tried to learn Shadowrun, I felt like I was like trying to figure it out. It was really tough because I was trying to learn 3rd edition. And then I tried to learn Anarchy. And Anarchy, I could see great ideas there, but it's not really standalone. I mean, it's not standalone at all. You have to also have the 50 rulebook for half of what's in Anarchy. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing that. And so when someone turned me on to 2nd edition, it was like this breath of fresh air. I was like, oh my God, thank God. Like it gave you just basically what you need to know to play it. And it kind of was like, you want to use, like you said, you want to use it a reaction roll for remote controlling a car. Okay. It's up to you. There's no really a spelled out way to do it. And I kind of love that. But I can see why people coming from later editions, they feel like they're missing something. Like, well, where is the rule for that? Like, okay, but what happens if this? Like, there's all these gotchas to, I don't know. I feel like I wonder what that's like for Ghost. Have you picked up second edition yet, or have you been flipping through it for this? I know you come
more or
from
less.
40.
Like I've been doing it for the book club. Aside from that, I haven't really looked at like playing. Is like if someone were to say, "Hey, we're playing on like Wednesdays," and like I might like join then and just be a player. But as a GM, I kind of want to amalgamate everything into like take bits and pieces of the rules and like crush into like one giant me edition. Like we got a bunch of people told me they want to try Shadowrun, and I was like, well, I'm best at writing 4th edition, and they were like, all right, let's do 4th edition. So I'm gonna build 4th edition, but I was looking at a bunch of the different parts of 4th edition, and I was like, you know what, I don't like the initiative here. So I took the initiative from 2nd edition and just kind of like crushed it in. And like just been doing that with some concepts from like 6th edition and whatnot, and just trying to like get something that I can a base system where I can present the experience and the narrative story that I want to tell, without saying like these rules suck constantly and trying to like force myself to use rules I don't like. But that's like whenever I pick an edition for anything, it's always like, what does the GM want to run? If I'm the GM, I'll run whatever I want to run. Like if you want to play as a player, then you're stuck with that. But like when I'm playing someone else's game, I mean, you can run this in like D&D 5th edition for all I care. Just like do what you think is best. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Right. That was sort of what I found when I was looking for. I was trying to figure out how to play Shadowrun, and I was looking for advice. No one was talking about 2nd edition because there's this whole idea that 3rd edition is sort of the penultimate. It's got all the stuff that 2E does, is what people basically try to simplify it as, because they rolled all the advanced stuff into it. But some super chill guy was like, you should try 2nd edition. And then when I was like looking into it, it just seemed like way just easier to digest. And so that was my experience coming to 2nd edition. But I feel like there's all these guys that just never stop playing 2nd edition because they're like, oh, that's getting a little too complicated. I'm good.
I mean, over the years, like it's been like 10 years now since like I just keep meeting people that are all about like, my edition is the best, you should really play this edition, and like they argue to no end, and it's like, well, like it might have some good things, but like I know a bunch of things that I don't like about it, and they're like, but like, and they're really adamant that their edition is the only edition that's like worth trying. So it's
right.
It's like and so go on the edition wars.
Yeah.
But it's good that like people are showing interest in 2nd edition, because there's a lot of good things in previous editions that have been like since like streamlined out, because like they just keep wanting to simplifying it, and then they end up making it too complicated. Well, every time they do that, we end up losing like important, nice parts of like Shadowrun. Like the whole idea with like shamans. There's no more shamans in like later editions. They're basically mages with a different name, and they use a different stats to cast their spell. Like if you compare that to like, I believe they're still around in 2nd edition, where like spirit summoning was really their thing. And yeah, mages can do like elemental spirits, but it was nothing like playing a shaman.
Right.
Yeah.
And something that you said, Tom, earlier on in our book club, where you were like, you guys were trying to compete with D&D.
Yeah.
Like this, if you think about 2nd edition, it's only 2 years old when it was written. So you guys were really, I see it when I read this, it feels like there's that effort, or at least an awareness, that people might not know what Shadowrun is. When I read 3rd edition, it doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like it's written for people who know Shadowrun and read 2nd edition. And guess what? All the rules you love from 2nd edition are in here, plus some new ones. I feel like it starts to get this insider baseball
the whole situation and that
feel.
it's not the issue with it.
You should read Anarchy and pretend not to know anything about Shadowrun.
I can say
What's
that go ahead, say it again, Johnson.
You should Anarchy. You need to know how to play.
Yeah, exactly. Anarchy. it's a great ideas on. It has some great ideas on how to simplify gameplay, but it completely assumes you understand how all of it works first, and then the whole book basically tells you what to forget. So it's not. People always I always see people recommending it to new players, and I'm like, you got to stop, because it isn't for new players. It's for people that are sick of rules, that have played forever and know the rules really well. And so that's, for me, I will always recommend second. I won't recommend second edition to everybody. I mean, if they're super into crunch, like I know my place, I'll stay back. Second edition has those, but it's not. I'm sure it's not for everybody. But for new players, I feel like it's a great edition to recommend, because it starts off by assuming you don't know what Shadowrun is.
Fohawk, from remembering my youth, I can confirm what you said, especially about the people not knowing what Shadowrun is and competing with D&D. There was one point where I was at a game convention in Los Angeles, and I attended a game, and FASA sent someone out to run it. Unfortunately, I can't remember who, and no one showed up but my team. The guy was sent out to LA, had 4 slots, and we played the only one. No one showed up.
That's awesome.
That's how mine was, right? Like we played stuff, and I was at my game store, and I was like, "Oh, what's this? This is cool." The cover was just like, I'm like, huh, interesting, man. I turned to my buddy, I said, "Hey, we want to try this out?" He's like, "Sure, man." So we spent hours playing it. Second ed's been fun. I came back not too long ago to gaming, and another buddy of mine's like, "Yeah, dude, you want to play a Shadowrun game? It's 6th ed." And I was like, "Okay, sure. What the heck?" I'm like, "All right, it's not bad, but I'll go back to 2E. Thanks, though." It's just way too much complication for 6th edition, but it's one of those things where. But I will always enjoy 2E. It's brings back good memories from 30 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, that was 89 first edition. That was before Vampire, before some of the other games that broke out also.
Yep.
So it really was. We're gonna whose market share were we gonna eat? D&D, we hoped, because that was the only one that had market share to eat. Everybody else was small enough that you could keep the game company afloat, but it wasn't, you weren't market dominating by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe some of the Games Workshop stuff, but again, that was a slightly different. BattleTech was fighting Games Workshop all the time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you fighting that more for Game Workshop than anything else, but.
But in terms of role-playing games, it was D&D, and then everybody else, was so much smaller. I mean,
punching up.
Yeah. It was, our sales were crazy for first edition and then second edition compared to things that had come before that.
You guys got a Genesis game. I mean, that's to me, that's awesome. Well, that is success.
And the Genesis game and the Super Nintendo game came about because of the world building, right? Because people went, "Oh man, that sounds cool. Oh, it's tech and magic." Same reason that we thought it would go into the, once we accepted the fact that magic was going to be in the game and it wasn't stupid. It was a marketing position. It was something that was going to be very different. The Sega game came about. That was a producer guy named Scott Burfield, who was at I don't remember the company that actually did the Sega game, but he was the producer on that. He was a friend of Jordan Weissman's, so he was able to sell Sega and say, "Look, this is really cool." I don't remember. I think the Super Nintendo one came about because some of the guys at Beam. I don't remember. Data East is the one who did the Super Nintendo I don't remember who. I don't remember where the chicken was and where the egg was in that relationship. But the guy who did it at Data East was Denny Thorley, who eventually came over to FASA afterwards and was the executive producer on Mech Commander and Mech Assault, and ran FASA Interactive, and then that became Day One, and that FASA Interactive got purchased by Microsoft, and then Day One was built from the money the money Denny made from selling FASA Interactive. And then I worked for him again at Day One to do Mech Assault.
Then you went into video gaming for a while after this?
No, yeah,
Like
in
video game creation?
94, 95, I went to Fast Interactive to be the designer on Mech Commander, which was our Command and Conquer style RTS BattleTech game.
Love the Mech Commander, one of my favorites.
And then I kind of stayed on the digital side after that.
Speaking of video games, like for all the complexity that is in Shadowrun, I'm surprised there's not more video games that can run on it, because you could have all the Matrix and all these super complex systems just kind of like be automated by the computer.
Yep. The issue is, and this is why it's so impressive that Harebrained was able to pull it off, was the art scope of having to do so many different worlds just to play the core of the game. I mean, even in the Super Nintendo and the Sega games, you saw the tension in trying to do all of it. It's just so much to do. And in fact, in the Data East game, they bailed at the last minute on the whole Matrix side and ended up just using Minesweeper because they just ran out of time. They just couldn't. They just couldn't pull it off. So one of them just said, "Fuck it, we're just doing Minesweeper. That's the Matrix." Okay.
I mean, I know there's a handful of like cyberpunky games out there, but like compared to everything else in cyberpunk in general, and like not to mention like the twist Shadowrun puts onto it on like by adding magic, it's like goldmine just waiting to happen. Like every time someone pulls off a good cyberpunk game, it just goes viral. Look at the Harebrained games, the cyberpunk now that it's fixed, the cyberpunk Edgerunner show. People love cyberpunk.
Well, the CD Projekt Red cyberpunk game is a good cautionary tale, right? Because you had this big giant company that made the Witcher games and knew what they were doing. Imagine if they had to do cyberpunk plus magic.
But it's also like a thing of scope, right? You get a smaller studio doing a smaller, like look at Harebrained games. Like it's nowhere near the scope of the Cyberpunk 2077, but like it still stands on its own, and it's like really immersive and fun.
Yep. And again, that was Jordan's company, right? So he was intimate with the IP and all the conversations and all the analyses we've did over the years about what would work and what wouldn't work. Because there were, I mean, even when I was there were bigger conversations about how to do Shadowrun. There was supposed to be a Shadowrun text game on, God, I can't think of what the platform was. It probably would have ended up on AOL or on Genie. But there was a company, I'm spacing on the name, it's just too long ago.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
That did a text, basically a mush, through those portals. And they contracted to do Shadowrun and very quickly realized that it was too ambitious, that they couldn't. It was just too much to do all of it. So it never came to pass.
Let's see.
Well, and even with Harebrained Schemes, you can they making it a turn-based game simplifies so much of that problem. You know, when you're trying to run everything into like a real-time first-person world, that's so much harder to make all those work.
Yeah, that might be a bit like more ambitious, but like even first like third person turn-based or third person like real time, both of those have potential. So you just have to like keep the scope in rein so that you're not thinking of we're just doing the main thing. We're gonna put like 200 hours of gameplay into this, and then you realize, we also have to add a Matrix part to like flesh out the entire 200 hours of gameplay there, and then Astral part is like, well, maybe we could get around just doing like a 30-hour game, like putting out there, giving people some good time, not selling it for like $80, and
I will say, for anyone that wants like a super tiny indie Decker feeling game, there's this game it's an indie game called Quadrilateral Cowboy. It's super indie and weird, but it's a really cool. It's like an infiltration game as like a hacker, and it's just really.
You'll have to put links to that.
I'll put a link in.
Yeah.
Like, but I did want to get a couple more. I know Noish had a couple more questions here, and I wanted to ask you. He asked if the team considered treating ice like critters during the development process. which I'm guessing means like to give them powers.
Yeah,
or...
yeah. I don't recall it per se. That just would have made it even more complicated. But yeah, I don't. It's an interesting idea. I don't recall it per se. But if I'm, my gut reaction is that the sources we were stealing from never treated it that way, right? They were the hacking decking opposition was always very simple and single-minded, right? So it was this thing that looked this way that did this thing. It wasn't like, multiple powers and different things to think about and what. They were all just, very, very binary, if you will.
Right.
That was
kind of like the geography, like you were saying, like in the sense that here's your playbook that everyone's kind of used to. And then when you go off of that, it's like, whoa, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
That's cool. I actually kind of look at them. I see them kind of like critters too, in the sense that they're all it was like they have their different names and they have their different uses and what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah, they're just really, really simple.
Much simpler, yeah.
And more importantly, they didn't have multiple stats. They all had just simple.
Right. He has this is an interesting one. This is a world building question. Who pays for or maintains the grids around the world? Is it generally municipal governments, or do the corps put together a pool? Was the idea that there's a primary entity that pays for it?
The Illuminati is the phone company. That's a good question. I don't remember. I think it was. I think the RTGs and stuff are predominantly governments, but they get subsidized by the corporations for all intents and purposes. So
that's sort of how I read it, because it's almost like, how does the government maintain any power?
Yeah.
The corporate council gives it to them.
Right.
Yeah, that's the best part of the Matrix chapter, is reading about like 1980s telephone grid put into the 2050s. It's like, oh my God, I remember having to dial long distance.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you look at you look at the RTG map key, it's all coded based on government.
Right on.
Also, I mean, it's also kind of fitting, because I think a lot of the hacking stuff came out of hacking the phone companies, right? Like the phone creatures were the first people that were doing stuff like that.
Right. And the government was the one that laid basically the foundations of the Matrix.
Yeah, back then you just Captain Crunch whistle, blow the phone, you got your free long distance.
Free long distance, yeah.
2600.
Yep.
Cool. So official answer is that the telephone company is the Illuminati. Got it.
They are secretly the most powerful corporation out there.
Okay.
Well, that's because everybody needs them, right?
Yep. And all data passes through them, so they know it all.
And then he had, last thing was just more of a comment. He said the blue, green, orange, red for scale difficulty is very elegant. So compliment. I agree.
Okay.
It seems elegant, but I'm still confused as to what, like, when do you use the color dice or color threshold, and when do you use the number threshold? When I was reading it, I was like, is this supposed to be like,
I think they're the same thing. They're just
the color bit determines how many successes you need.
Yeah, color is successes, and the number is your target number.
But they are the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, the number is your target number. So like orange. The Ttrpg one is it's orange, but it's harder because the target number is like 5 instead of 4 or 3.
Yeah, it's a 5.
Right.
It's an orange 5. Yep. So your target 5, 3 successes needed.
It's the only, to me, I think, somebody correct me, but I feel like it's the only rule in the book that where 1 success isn't enough. Like it's like it's the only thing that where you have to have a certain amount of successes.
It may not be the only one, but I totally agree with you, because it kind of goes against the basic premise, which is 1 success is success, and the rest is the measure of success. Great spot. I didn't see that.
Well, I only know it because it took me a second to get my head around it, because I was sort of like, well, wait a second, like Ghost is saying, like I rolled the number, so like, what does the color do?
Yep.
And it's like, well, I need to roll that many successes. It also determines what kind of ice can be used So, I mean, you probably already knew that. But
Yep.
I think that's was a really elegant solution in that way, too, where it's like you could have a target number 9 system that's technically very hard to get into. But if it's like a green system, then you're not too worried about it. You know it's hard to get into, but you're not like, this thing isn't going to freaking try to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like a, target number 5 that's a red or whatever, violet, as VR 2.0 mentions.
Yeah,
it's like that's scarier.
Yeah, because like UCAS itself is a green 4, but Quebec is a green 2. So, the same stuff inside, but you can get into Quebec easy. I think that's the weakest one. Nope, Transpolar Alute is a 2, green 2 also.
Where did you
I didn't
guys
bring up that?
get the
Bermuda is a green 2 also, so is the Virgin Islands.
Virgin Islands as well is a green too.
Where
South,
did you guys
South Florida. See, even then we knew.
Where did you guys get the lore for Quebec?
What's that?
What was that?
Where did the lore for Quebec come around?
Oh God, I don't remember. I think didn't Nigel write that book?
Yeah, what is it? Neo-Anarchist Guide to North America. It's probably in there.
Yeah,
It's got to be in there. Oh, I have a historical question. So, this must be around the same time that the Secret Service raided Steve Jackson Games. Did anyone think? Was that just weird? Did everyone think that was just weird, or did that have any impact on what any of you guys were doing?
It had no impact on what we were doing. Man, I know stories. How to talk about this, because I know stories. Let's just say there's a reason you fictionalize things so that you don't actually have documents that actually talk about how to do things in real life. I know that was a little cryptic, but
I heard he had real information, like on, I don't know if it was on the company computer or on his personal computer. I've heard that before.
Man.
Allow me. Tune in next time, everyone.
I can neither confirm nor deny. I can neither confirm nor deny. But
back then, it was like a scary boogeyman, but nowadays you can get a how to hack book from like chapters. Like if you really want to get into
it wasn't
that
hard
stuff.
to get that stuff
Like,
then either, if you knew where to go on Usenet and.
Right. But like, what I mean is, like, now you can just walk up to a normal bookstore or like order it from Amazon, and you can get like all the how-tos with like, and that's just it's the same thing. You
can go to college for it. I mean, please.
Right. But going to college requires dedication, right? Getting like a PDF or a book and then like reading through it.
Funding.
Yeah. Like that requires nothing. Like some high school kid picks up the book, he can learn how to hack in a couple months.
Well, to be fair, they did have the Anarchist Cookbook, which they were Shadowrun with spoofing. Like you could actually buy that back.
You could, but
you can still get copies. Yeah.
So back then they thought that they were afraid hackers would like hack into nuclear silos and like start a world war or something.
Yep.
And
by the way, backing up to a conversation, looking at the Neo-Anarchist Guide to North America credits, Nigel did in fact write Quebec. Quebec and Quebec City was his.
We just got this question's a little more in depth, Tom. So just a fair warning. But so Bumblebee's asking, he wants to know on page 179, where it gives the combat rules, how the last piece works. He said he could never figure out if the extra successes it mentions.
179?
179, yes. And it's the part where it says it's contact range, and he's got determine the effect, the last piece circled.
Okay. Hang on.
Compare the
Make me actually use my brain.
To be a bad man, I can say I've never used range in the Matrix. I always assume everyone's in range to make my life simpler.
Yep, I hear you.
That's kind of what I'm going to do too.
This was like which part?
So he's asking about the extra successes. The extra successes are used to determine the actual effect per the individual program.
I think what it is if what you're using requires successes to have a variable effect, then you just use the extra successes.
I think it's referring
Right.
to the program. So we go back to the
Yeah,
programs.
that's what I when I read it, I was like, okay, it means it's going to change depending on the program you're attacking. Whatever program you're using, we'll talk about what extra successes will do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a general way of telling you to refer to the program you're using or attacking.
That sounds like an answer.
I need to stay quiet. We want your answer. I don't know. I'm just learning this, but that's what I thought when I read it.
Yeah, I'd have to.
How do I
dig
figure out
way
how many
deeper
extra
into
successes there are?
Remember. Yeah, right. So like an attack program, every success is a single wound on the target's condition monitor. So in after the resistance test at close range, at contact range, the extra successes are what would be used to determine the damage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that make sense? I don't know, but
how do I figure out? He's asking, but how do I figure out how many extra successes there are?
Well, you resolve a resistance test. Oh, it's a resistance test. It's not an opposed test.
Oh, the security code part's throwing him off.
Were we that crazy that made you generate? Oh, the security. Oh my God.
So you're still the color of the system.
Color, yeah.
Still...
So if you're the defender in a red node, you've got to overcome 4 extra successes to have an effect. That's crazy.
So if you're the defender, so like the ice is attacking you, you have to overcome 4 extra successes on top of.
Yeah. Ignore that.
It might be what if it might be an either or thing. Like it says that like, okay, you got 1 extra success over the ice, but like you still need to consider getting enough successes to overcome the security code of the node.
Yeah, but then it says ice need never worry about the security codes, and then it says the persona may ignore security codes when resisting an attack.
Yeah, so what happens if
the last sentence broke me.
What happens if you're fighting another decker? Like, how are you guys?
The next section is persona versus persona.
The next section.
That one's actually easier. It's just opposed tests.
That's it.
Yeah, that's just straight up. And you're effectively running it on the other guy's deck so you don't worry about the security code. This is a great example of too complex. Overthinking the problem.
Yeah, this is just an example of like, I wish there would have been like a 2.5 edition, just kind of like re-editing and like smoothing things as opposed to like throwing half of it out and then adding like, another mountain of things to chew through.
Yeah, because if you wanted that effect, nowadays I would just look at setting target numbers based on the security code and leaving it at that, as a kind of a minimum. Everything that's in a node that security code is, a minimum. If it's a yellow, it's a minimum of 3, and then you can add on top of that if it's particularly sophisticated.
Right. Very good question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's probably a good example of overthinking the problem.
As much as I love the color that it makes a red node harder, it makes it harder to play, so I ignore it.
Yep, totally there with you.
I think you can monetize a cleaned up Shadowrun 2E now with that community.
Well, so
that community program.
That was going to be my closing question. Is that with Hollow Streets, now there's the possibility of selling a new supplement for 2nd edition, and we'd kind of broached this subject a little bit before, Tom. But is that something you would be interested in doing at some point?
I don't know. At some point, perhaps.
Yeah.
Not right this moment, because as of June 1st, I technically have a new job. I get promoted to dean of the school that I work in.
Oh, nice.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
I don't know what that means in terms of brain load just yet.
Everything's going to work out fine until as the other person like leaves the campus, the whole place catches fire.
Yeah.
Now you know why he quit.
Yep. Yeah. Fortunately,
Do I have to go?
I was gonna say, fortunately, that's not going to happen. I mean, he's leaving on good terms. The transition has been going fine. I don't fully have my head wrapped around everything I need to do and how I need to do it. I mean, I have a good idea because I was his number 2 for 7 years.
Oh, good.
But there's more to it.
Sure.
Does this mean I have to go back to school so Tom Dowd could put me on double secret probation?
I can do that.
Right.
I can just do that. That's easy.
You're like, it says here for extra credit, I could rewrite this 2E Matrix chapter. What is this?
That's it. I'll
outsource it.
We'll have a class.
Yeah.
And then I'll steal all the work at the end.
And then we have to break into the Matrix to get our work back, right?
That's right.
There you go.
That's the final exam.
It all comes full circle. Shadowrun was written for this moment. That was the whole point.
I even feel
congrats on that. That's awesome.
Like an 80s comedy thing going on.
What's that?
I said I feel like it would be an 80s comedy kind of a deal to steal back our work that Tom took.
That's right.
Right.
Got to have the montage in there.
Oh, it's funny. I still had, when I checked the Who Wrote Quebec, I still have Neo-Anarchist Guide to North America open. And I had totally forgotten that Sam Lewis wrote that neo-anarchist economic manifesto that opens it.
Oh yeah.
It's just crazy.
All right. Cheers. Good luck to the rest of you.
Good night, Ghost. I'm gonna wrap this up too.
Yep.
I feel like, unless anybody else has any super pressing questions, but I felt this was great just being able to talk through and gush over the Matrix.
Oh, I know. Kung Fu. Oh, not that Matrix.
An iconic chapter.
Yes, and iconic
Yes.
that has plagued us for years, not centuries.
A misunderstood chapter.
Yeah, like you said, going back and reading it, it's like, oh, I didn't have to be that hard on myself when I was trying to do this 30 plus years ago.
Yep.
Well, we just ran into a situation, like an example in that with that question, where reading the book, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I got it. And then I'd run the session and I might come across that exact situation that Bumblebee was asking. And I might be like, oh shit, what do I do here? Whatever, I'll just do this. and then you get through it. But
it's the GM's call, and that's what it is. People might not be happy, but there you go.
But that's why I'll push this edition's Matrix, because at least reading it, it felt simple enough that I felt I had the confidence to run it. And then I can iron out those details at the table. Whereas like VR 2.0, I don't even know how to fucking start. I don't even know where to, I don't want to, I'm like, you're an NPC. Deckers are NPCs. That's it.
Nobody's a Decker.
That's why we can't have nice things. But anyway, congrats, Tom, on the new job. That's great. That makes total sense that you would not have a ton of time right now, but we will all hold our breath and wait with a bated breath for possibly down the.
I will absolutely think about it.
That's there you go. There's hope. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. Tom, thank you again for going through this with us. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting and running this thing, Frank.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.
Oh, yeah. So, for next month, we'll read. I'll write out what we're going to read because it's not going to be as easy as just like a chapter. Yeah. Behind the scenes. Yeah, let's do behind the scenes.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. And I'll hopefully get this episode up quicker this time so we can all go through it. So, all right.
Sure you will. Okay.
All right. Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. There you go. There's the Matrix section. I personally had an awesome time just reading through that section. Like, I think a lot of the advice we get when we start learning Shadowrun is just skip that section and go straight to VR 2.0, or just don't worry about Matrix and make it an NPC or whatever. This was very therapeutic. I recommend also going through it yourselves and just reading through it. It's actually not that big or dense of a chapter. And as I'm reading it, I'm figuring out things I think I could pull from it and things I could leave out of my game to just make it much more streamlined. And I'm definitely gonna bring a decker into our game as a player character. And you also heard it. Maybe one day we'll get a revised version from the man himself. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you liked it and want to subscribe to it. If you don't like it, I'm really sorry. That was a long video that you didn't like at all. But anyway, if you want to join the book club, please check out the description below. There's instructions there that'll tell you how to sort of join. And we'll catch you guys next time. We're checking out the behind the scenes section, which is arguably one of the most important sections of Shadowrun. If you're ever going to be GMing 2nd edition, this is the section you want to read. Anyway, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.